Since we've heard from the ER, lawyers, what's the stupidest reason you've been asked to sue for? What was the outcome? Story 1. I could go on all day, but I'll limit it to the two most egregious. I'm a retired public defender. Before I started with the PD's office, I worked briefly for a private firm where I encountered these two cases. 1A. Single-parent mom had to fly to an out-of-town training for her job. Deadbeat dad wasn't paying child support because he claimed he couldn't find a job. This will be important later. Mom left her 4-year-old daughter with her sister, the child's aunt. While mom's away, the aunt takes the girl to Chuck E. Cheese. A repairman at Chuck E. Cheese opens an access panel to repair the pulley that operates the giant puppets. Repairman goes in back to get a tool and leaves the access panel open. The girl puts her hand in the opening and her fingers are severed. She's rushed to the ER, and the docs want a parent. With mom out of town, deadbeat dad is called in. After consulting with the docs and with the girl in the OR, deadbeat dad calls the law firm from the waiting room and wants to know if he has a case. He wants to include lost wages as part of his damages. I left for a public defender soon after that, and I don't know how this case ever resolved. 2A, a 28-year-old man marries a 16-year-old girl, much to the dismay of her parents. In this state, a 16-year-old can marry without parental consent if she's pregnant, which she was. He proves to be a chronically unemployed and abusive husband. The mother-in-law convinces the girl to take the baby and come home. With her gone, the husband of the year goes out and finds a high school girl. The wife changes her mind and returns to her husband with the baby. Months later, the husband is served in a paternity suit from the high school girl he was with during the wife's absence. He makes an appointment with me and wants to know if I can force the mother-in-law to pay the child support to the high school girl, since it was the mother-in-law's fault that the wife wasn't there for him to get intimate with, thereby forcing him to seek out a high school girl. We did not take the case. I would just quietly say, "You are a terrible human being. I hope you live for eternity so that you may learn to regret your actions. Now get out of my office." Story 2. I turn down at least 2 meritless cases every day. I'm convinced that the media, friend of a friend stories, and people that can't differentiate between getting nasty grams and getting sued blow the number of frivolous lawsuits that actually go to court out of proportion. It takes one stupid case among 50 states and 300+ million people to make headlines every few months for Americans to think lawsuits are out of control. Moreover, journalists and lay people know far less about the law than they think. It leads to many ostensibly frivolous cases being misportrayed in the media. See, for example, Liebeck versus McDonald's. Almost all attorneys that pursue tort claims work on contingency and front all costs, way more than you think after depositions and expert witnesses, mal cases, and they can run 6 figures. You lose a surprising amount of money by signing stupid cases. That said, the dumbest call I've gotten is tied between, number 1, a mental patient calling because he didn't satisfy his girlfriend. I told him that'd be his girlfriend's claim. And number 2, a redneck calling because he wanted his old teeth back that a dentist extracted. Slip and fall cases have the worst reputation, but are almost always awful. It's a rare day, and a magical set of facts when I sign those up. In order to win, one typically needs a business to have, number 1, some sort of defect on their property. 2, the business needs to have known about the defect and neglected to correct it, or the defect was there so long they should have known, for example, with reasonable property inspections. And 3, the defect isn't open and obvious. If you have all of those and someone injures themselves, I think a suit is reasonable. If you're profiting by inviting people on your property, you have a duty to not keep your property in negligent disrepair. And at least in my jurisdiction, jury verdicts and settlements are much less than the media makes you think. Wage loss, medical bills, and other economic expenses they incurred, and pain and suffering, not that much. Jobless people that sue don't make that much money because they have no wage loss. Those famous astronomical verdicts result from punitive damages, which only occur when the business was being particularly egregious. Scandals, cover-ups, etc. See the McDonald's case again. Story 3. Lady calls 911 and says the dump truck in front of her is spilling gravel all over the road and her truck. I ask her if any damage is done to her vehicle, and she says she doesn't know. Officers find the dump truck, follow it about a mile, and don't observe any gravel spilling out. They pull it over anyway to get driver, company insurance information, assuming she wants to make a damage to property report. I ask the lady to stop with the officers or bring her vehicle to the police department so they can see the damage and to the report for her insurance company. She tells me she doesn't have time because her daughter's late for a singing lesson. 2 weeks later, after a hailstorm, she comes to the police department to make a report for damage, but she's driving another vehicle. She claims her truck is already at the repair shop and the estimate is $3,000. Officer tells her he can't make a report for damage without seeing the vehicle, but he goes ahead and makes an information-only report to appease her. Now she's trying to sue the police department because the officer won't testify that the dump truck is the cause of the damage. Story 4. Not a lawyer, but I did get sued once for child support. My deadbeat dad, ex-husband, called after 5 years of no contact and no financial support. He's dying. Kids see him. The younger one wants to stay with him for a while. She stays with him and his new wife and daughter. They live in the same town. He miraculously gets better. 4 months in, I got a letter from his lawyer for child support. Says I'm a deadbeat mom. He's had her for years without any support from me. I walked into the remediation meeting with school and medical records, divorce, support papers, history of his non-payment through the state, and of course, proof of his other daughter who still lived with me. Apparently, he forgot to tell his lawyers a few things. Younger daughter was dumped back on my doorstep the next day, and I never heard from his lawyer again. That was over 20 years ago, and he's still alive. Story 5. My boss was holding a fundraiser for our city's art museum. He and his family over the years have given this museum cash and art gifts worth approximately $40 million. During the fundraiser, one of the employees trips on a stone walkway and sues my boss for $2 million. What the employee failed to understand is that because of his multi-million-dollar art collection, the boss has security cameras covering every inch of his property. They showed that the fall was staged, and the plaintiff had to pay my boss legal fees. The museum refused to fire the employee because she was banging the director, and for that, they will never get another donation from his family again. This family's art collection travels to museums around the globe and is currently valued in the low to mid 9 figures. Story 6. My uncle used to own a sawmill in southern Massachusetts. Some lady came by and came into his property even though the gate was closed, and he didn't come out when she rang the bell. She then slipped in water and fell, breaking her arm. She then sued him for damages and won an almost $1 million case against him. It's complete insanity, and my uncle had to pay with almost his entire life savings. He's a veteran suffering with PTSD, now in financial ruin, still dealing with payments almost 10 years later. He had to sell his sawmill and now lives in a trailer in New Hampshire. If this is true, the jury had to find a reason to assign punitive damages. I doubt a broken arm could be worth $1 million in actual damages. Story 7. My sister was sued by this elderly woman. It was her senior year of high school toward the end of the year. She's leaving school and takes a right onto the road. Her and the elderly woman got into a car accident, and the police officer found my sister at fault. Within a year later, my parents learned that the old lady is suing them for doctor appointments and such. When it comes to the case, we find that the elderly woman had been taking prescription pills that affect motor skills. Worst case, the pills were in the daughter's name, not hers. Not only that, but the old lady had been speeding in a 35-mile-per-hour school zone. She actually admitted to it. Parents didn't have to pay a dime to the old board. Story 8. I'm on the defense side of the house, but I saw a township get sued because 3 of the township supervisors had lunch together and didn't invite the plaintiff. He claimed that it was in violation of sunshine and government laws. He had no evidence of any wrongdoing and filed on his own behalf because no actual lawyer would take his case. I read his complaint, part of it. It was 128 pages long and quoted, among other things, the Declaration of Independence and Patrick Henry at length. The judge tossed it out and entered an order prohibiting him from suing the township again unless he had an actual lawyer or the court's permission. Story 9. I saw one here a while ago from some guy whose dad is a doctor. He performed some form of shoulder surgery on a woman, letting her maintain use of her arm. A few years later, she decided to sue him because she got throat cancer and the surgery enabled her to continue smoking. What the frick, America? Why are you guys so obsessed with suing? If I was the judge, I would have agreed that the surgeon was at fault and demanded that he amputate the arm as compensation. Not optional amputation, compulsory amputation. Story 10. My fire tech teacher has a great story he told me of. He worked with the fire department and they're called to a car accident. The first car is smashed in and they get the jaws of life. Open it up, one man survived and his 9-month pregnant wife was decapitated. Another firefighter proceeded to do an emergency C-section and save the man's baby. Well, after finding out he was out of scope for doing so, the man sued the firefighter. He sued him for saving his only child. Story 11. Worked in law firms for 10 plus years. Heard a great true story where a guy comes in with his wife and teen daughter to discuss defense against a claim that the dad fiddles the daughter. The guy basically says, "It's my daughter, I can do what I want with her." The mom says nothing. The lawyer was disbarred for vaulting the table and punching the dad. There should be a one free punch clause for lawyers and doctors. Heck, everybody should get one free punch. Story 12. Not a lawyer, but my dad had a man try to sue him for a tree falling on his car. My dad had sold him a house about a decade before, and there was a tree next to the driveway. Well, the man decided to cut the tree down, but being the idiot he was, it fell on his car. So logically, it was my dad's fault, and he sued him. Please tell me that the guy who cut down the tree didn't win. Story 13. My friend had a client who wanted to sue his parents for emotional abuse. That abuse consisted of giving the client a name he didn't like. It's not even as if the name was one of those ridiculous ones. It was perfectly ordinary, if a little uncommon in my country. Needless to say, my friend didn't agree to represent the guy. I could understand some people wanting to take legal action for this. Life ain't easy for a boy named Sue. Story 14. When I played football, there was a mom who tried suing the school for discrimination because they never let him play. She said it was because he was black. Almost our entire starting lineup was black, and all but 2 coaches were black. But her sons are going to go big, didn't you know? Obviously, it can't be because he isn't as good as the other players. This is only a step beyond what's normal in youth sports. Story 15. Let me take the opportunity to say this. If you think you might have the case, talk to a lawyer about it. The amount of seemingly obnoxious cases that win or settle is surprisingly high. But so are the number of legitimate slam dunk cases that never get pursued. I see people on the internet dismissing the idea of talking with lawyers all the time. Contrary to popular belief, lawyers don't start billing the second you walk in the door. Story 16. A lady tried suing a train company because her husband was killed by one of their trains. Sounds responsible? No. Her husband came to a stop at the crossing, then decided to drive his truck through the barrier and was hit by the train. In the process, parts of this man went flying into the kingdom and landed on some lady's windshield. She sued the man's family for damages and because it traumatized her. Yeah, I think I remember this story actually. There was a chain of lawsuits that followed the initial incident, and it just seemed to grow more and more absurd with each passing day. Like, as news of the man's unfortunate collision with the train and his subsequent dismemberment began to spread, it just ignited a frenzy of legal action that spiraled out of control. Like, in response to the wife's lawsuit against the train company, where she was claiming negligence and seeking compensation for her husband's accident, a group of disgruntled commuters filed a class action lawsuit against the wife, blaming her for causing emotional distress and delayed train schedules. They were arguing something like the lawsuit added more overall inconvenience to their daily commutes, something like that. And amidst all the chaos, the driver of the car struck by the dismembered limbs decided to sue not only the man's family, but also the train company and the local government responsible for maintaining the train crossing. The driver was claiming that the inadequate safety measures or something at the crossing were responsible for the accident, and the emotional distress caused by the limbs hitting their car warranted further damages. The train company, now feeling the pressure from multiple lawsuits, retaliated by suing the manufacturer of the train crossing barriers, and now they were arguing that the barriers failed to function properly and should have prevented the man from driving past them in the first place. Additionally, I think they sued the local government, claiming that the government's negligence in maintaining the barriers also constituted a contributing factor to the accident. Ultimately, the manufacturer of the train crossing barriers, now facing mounting legal challenges, decided to countersue the train company, blaming them for improper installation and maintenance of the barriers. They argued that any failure of the barriers was a direct result of the train company's negligence, not their product. But meanwhile, the local government had found itself facing yet another lawsuit from a nearby business owner who was claiming that the accident negatively impacted their revenue. They were arguing, I think, that the increased attention on the incident and subsequent legal battles had scared away potential customers, causing financial loss and emotional distress. But now, as the web of lawsuits just continued to expand, an environmental activist group filed a lawsuit against the train company, local government, and the manufacturer of the train crossing barriers. These guys were alleging that the accident had led to an ecological disaster as the dismembered limbs polluted a nearby river, causing harm to the wildlife and disrupting the local ecosystem. They were seeking substantial damages for the ecological damages caused by the incident. The courts were overwhelmed with this bizarre chain of lawsuits, and the legal community began referring to it as the case cascade. Legal scholars everywhere debated the absurdity of the situation, questioning how such a tragic event could have led to such a convoluted and far-reaching legal battle. But as the years went by, the case cascade continued to generate headlines, with new lawsuits emerging from unexpected angles, and each one was more preposterous than the last. It served as a stark reminder of how, even in a single incident, you can create a domino effect of legal actions in the U.S. because people are just so trigger happy with calling out lawsuits, where the boundaries of reason are just stretched to their complete limits. Story 17. Guy sued the creators of Budweiser because he suffered emotional distress, mental injury, and financial loss because he didn't nail beautiful woman like the adverts promised, thus causing him to consume more and more. The judge basically told him to take it like a man, like the rest of us borderline alcoholics do. A guy sued Axe Body Spray for the same thing. He had a much stronger case. Story 18. Not a lawyer, but I'm a client manager at a law firm. I once had a man call in trying to sue the local Popeyes because they gave him a large order of wings instead of a small order of thighs. He had witnesses to prove it and everything. Story 19. I'm sure my lawyer thinks it's a bit ridiculous. A girl physically attacked me over a $1 burrito while she was blackout drunk, and is now trying to press assault and battery against me when all I did was shove her back a few times in self-defense. Story 20. There was a case in Australia recently where a woman was paid a workers' compensation claim after a lamp fell on her head as she was doing it while on a work trip. Story 21. One of my friends had to deal with a woman trying to sue her local council because she tripped over a pigeon. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.